All right, welcome to Meet the Artist, Technical Directors. First question is, how many technical directors do we have out in the audience today? We got quite a few hands. Not quite half, but close. All right, and for those of you who don't know what a technical director is, a technical director is basically an editor for live television production. We take in all sources, cameras, playback, graphics, satellite remotes, and we take it in a switcher and we feed it out on a line cut. We key, cut, and effects for the basic effect, the basic gist of what we do. We're working with a video switcher, and when you're live on the air, you can't fix it in post. So unless you take it into post-production, they can fix that. So.
For the West Coast, we fix things for the West Coast.
Okay, at the end of the panel, we got Dave Bernstein in the back with the new Divi to demo the new switcher from EVS. So if you don't know what a video switcher, wanted to get to know, or our technical director haven't worked with a Divi before, wonderful time to get to know it. I want to thank Adriana with the Editors Guild. Adriana's back of the house here. The Editors Guild and the Board of Directors for having the panel. All right. I'm Paul Overacker. I'll be moderating this. Just to give you my background, I've got about 25 years of experience as a technical director, over 20,000 hours of live television production, believe it or not. I've been nominated for a Sports Emmy for Super Bowl Live last year. I work on Red Zone, Dr. Phil, and the doctors over at Paramount Pictures. I also represent the technical directors on the board of directors here. And today with us, we have a wonderful panel of some of the great technical directors working in town here today. Eric Becker has been nominated for Grease Live, the Oscars, Tonys. He's won Emmys, primetime Emmys for.
Nominated to.
And he's been nominated, so Grease Live, the Oscars, the Tonys, American Idol, and the Grammys are among the few. I think you have a few more nominations than that, but those are the wins at least. Charles Shoup has been nominated for primetime Emmy 10 years in a row for Dancing with the Stars. He's won 4 out of the 10 years. He's also working on, he's worked on Hairspray Live, Judge Judy, America's Got Talent, some of the shows he's worked on. Lucinda Ireland, currently working on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, are 2 staple shows, but she also works on The Bachelor, Shark Tank, Tosh.0. She has a couple Emmys, local Emmys for
LA Marathon and Dodgers.
And Robert LaMacchia at the end here. He's got 2 primetime Emmys for the 2 separate opening ceremonies of the Olympics, Beijing 2008 and the Turin Winter Olympic Games. Is that correct? And a few Emmys for NFL on Fox. Okay, pre-game shows, sports Emmys on that. First question for you guys, how did you get into television? Eric, we'll start with you. What brought you into television? Did you go to school for this? Was it a drive?
It's kind of a little bit of everything. I actually took television class when I was in 7th grade, so it was really odd. My 7th grade school had a television class, but it did. It was one of 2 programs in the state of California. And then I also am a musician, so I was interested in recording studios. I worked in recording studios, and then I ended up working and doing sound for television, and that's how I got into television, was basically doing sound professionally. My first paying job, I was at a tape librarian, so I was working in the tape vault. So that's how I got my first paid job in television, was getting tapes for post-production, 2-inch tapes, inch tapes out of the tape vault. So that's kind of how I started, was in the tape vault.
And Charles, how did you get into television?
Actually, I wanted to be a DJ when I was in school, and I grew up in Canada, and sort of the premier radio and TV production school was Ryerson University in Toronto. So I went there, and the first year you had to take radio production, which was perfect. I loved it. Second year you had to take TV production. As soon as that happened, screw radio. You can do all these things with pictures. First of all, I love pushing buttons and making things light up and all that sort of stuff. So as soon as I sat in front of a switcher and you push a button and it lights up and something comes on the screen, you push a handle and something dissolves, and then you push another handle and it wipes across. It was like before video games, that was video games. And when I realized somebody's going to pay me to play video games, yeah, so that wasn't actually my job. That was, you know, I went to school, but at the end of my course, 3 years at the time, they hired me as a teacher's assistant. So then I taught TV production, having just learned TV production, and having absolutely no experience in real TV production. But it was fun. I got to play with everything. I got to edit on the tape machines, and edit radio, edit TV, all of that stuff. And I think just as the school term was ending, generally they hired one person from the graduating class, a teacher's assistant. You stayed there for a year, then you moved on. I had nothing else to go to, and CBC called the office and said, we need a couple of people for summer relief. Anybody you can recommend? I said, well, there's me, and I'll find you somebody else. And so I started working for CBC, and the first job was working at a switcher. You know, they just put you in there. They got an experienced switcher, technical. In Canada, they didn't have technical directors. They had technical producers, which was a management position, and then they had switchers who did what we do. What we do here in the United States is sort of a combination of the two jobs. And they got an experienced guy who would sit down with me and teach me how everything worked, and I would fortunately sit there. You know, I thought, I know all this stuff. He doesn't need to tell me any of that stuff. I've done 3 years of school and a year of teaching. But fortunately, I was smart enough to just play like I didn't know anything. And he taught me all sorts of stuff that I didn't know. So that's where I started. And then just kept on going with CBC, and then moved out west, worked for an independent station in Vancouver as a technical director, audio mixer, kind of did all the jobs in the station. And eventually moved on to directing and producing. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I worked at KCBS as a writer for a while, and at KTLA for a writer for their news department. And it just started feeling like a job, because I'd done that in Vancouver as well. And it just started feeling like a job. I thought, well, now what the hell am I going to do? And Hollywood Center, the lot management guy there was a guy named Pat Davis. And he hired me to fill in on some show. Asked me if I knew how to run a switcher. I said yes. Hired me to fill in on some show, and I barely knew what I was doing because the technology had gone way beyond me. And I just sort of struggled to catch up. And I did, and I realized this is what I love doing. Directing was fun, but I don't really have the personality for it because I'm kind of impatient with people. So.
There it is.
How did you get into television?
I started really young. I had not seventh grade, 8th grade. My TV class was in high school, so it was 9th grade. And I got my FCC license and was a DJ at a radio station at 14. And I got my first job at a TV station at 16 and quit school and went into television. You know, and so I was living in Las Vegas and grew up kind of overlapping with the LA crowd. We were just talking about that. And all the guys that were that were doing the big shows, there was like maybe a little show. So there'd be a boxing match with HBO there, and there'd be the Don King little tiny show beside it. So I was doing the little tiny show, and I'd walk into the truck and watched what they did and see what they did and ask questions. There were people like Jacobson and different people that were helpful and said, oh, well, this is how I do this. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Because I was literally grabbing manuals and getting there early and bringing 6 packs of beer to the engineers to open the truck up early so that I could have a few more minutes of time, you know, on the equipment. I mean, I worked at a TV station, but TV stations are sort of stuck in time. Whatever they bought is usually older, and they're going to keep it for a very long time. And live television, sports, and entertainment is on more updated equipment and is faster moving and moves them kind of like a warp speed comparatively. So I was trying to do both. So I worked full-time at a TV station, and then every weekend and every other day I could get, I worked freelance somehow and bounced back and forth. Started in sports out here in Los Angeles and was flying back and forth for NMT back then. And they said, hey, we're real busy, why don't you move out? So I moved out in '96.
All right. Thank you, Dad. Robert,
Well, I went to I took a photography class in 7th grade. We didn't have television. This was in Florida. We didn't have that luxury. So I was in photography, and I love photography, and somehow after graduating high school, I decided to go into take a television class, and I just took a 2-year school, and I loved switching. I don't know what it was, but you know, and we did different jobs every day. One day we'd come in, and the cables are on the floor if we didn't have a show, and you had to put the studio back together. You know, you had to figure out what needed blackburst, what needed, you know, put it all back together. So, but switching was my favorite thing to do, and I loved it. And I knew then that's what I wanted to do. So I got a job in radio first, then moved over to television, and then once I did all the jobs, you know, camera, prompter, all those things, I stayed late after the news, and I kept the voice track to the director who directed the news, and I'd play that back, and I'd stay after midnight, you know, 11:30, play that back, and sit in the TD chair, and I'd call up all, you know, all the effects, and I'd try and run the show as best I could with the track playing. You know, I'd put tape machines in and roll them and do everything. You know, it was that's how I got into it. That's my story. So and then I went into sports first after news. And nobody would let me, still even after doing that, nobody would let me switch a news brief. That was tough.
One camera.
Yeah,
With another
no,
silver box.
then they got rid, that person left, and a new person came in, then they let me switch. I'm like, I could do the news. No. Thanks, no. So, yeah, then I went into sports and then entertainment, so.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go to a question. It's, do you have a process of setting up a show? Like Eric, when you're working the Oscars, an award show, do you have a setup process that you go through with communication with playback, cameras, tape to organize everybody in the setup process? Is there a, everybody has their own little way of doing things. Is there an organized thing, or is it just communication with the crew and make sure everybody's on the same page?
Well, I think the ultimate goal is to make sure everything's working. We have ESU days, setup days, and that's before a director walks in or producer walks in. So we, you know, it's just it's engineering setup, or everybody show up. So the ESU.
Okay.
So
It's one of those two. I'm still not sure which one it is.
Is it just one day of setup?
No,
is that a rehearsal day as well?
It depends. Some shows you may have more than one ESU day. Typically, you get one ESU day.
Okay.
So make sure everything's working. That's taped. It's you know, all your graphics machines. You know, it's so by the end of the day, you just have to make sure everything's up and running, and which entails you know, a lot of different things. You know, tally lights, communications. I'm sitting here talking in front of Irv, who's an awesome TD. Been doing it for years and years and years. Good to see Irv. This guy has done so much television; it's unbelievable. Did all my favorite sitcoms back in the days. All in the Family.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, right here. This guy's history right here.
Charles, on Dancing with the Stars, are you guys on the same stage every time? Do they switch out the stage to another show, or what's your setup process on this? Do you have?
Well, my setup process is sort of the same for every show, and it usually starts with the technical meeting well before the season starts, or hopefully well before the season starts, where everybody shows up in the same room and they talk about what they want for the show, how many cameras and all that sort of stuff. And because I tend to be a little on the scattered side, I end up being fairly methodical going into a show. So, and they usually leave us till the last half hour when everybody else wants to go, because they want to talk about the script and how we're going to go from one segment to the next. And none of us have to be there for that, but we are. But at the end of it, I finally get my 15 minutes, and audio ends up with the same process as well. We get our 15 minutes where we go, how many cameras do you want? Where do you want your long lenses? Where do you want your wide lenses? What kind of shots are you going to get? Are you going to use special effects? Do you need monitors in the set? And what do you want fed into those monitors? Do you want videotape? Do you want just logos? Do they have to be color corrected so that they all look like they match the scene that you're shooting in? All of that sort of stuff. Who needs to talk to who? On the intercom system. Who needs to hear what? So I just sort of run down a long, long list of stuff, check off all the boxes. By the time I leave that meeting, I'm I'm ready to go into what Eric described as the ESU day, the engineering setup day. Now everybody has the same notes. We have camera utilities and audio utilities who come in. The engineering staff at the facility sets up all the tape machines and brings in all the cameras and provides all the cables. And these guys work from all the notes that we spent making. You have a complete, and now I know, there's a lot of TDs in the room, so they're familiar with the process. But for those of you who aren't, so that we have a complete setup. When we do a live show, it's live editing. Everything has to be there. You don't have the chance for post-color correction. You don't have the chance for post-editing, unless, you can make fixes if you broadcast to the East Coast. And if you have the time, you can fix any mistakes going to the West Coast. But for instance, we did a live sitcom, Undateable, last season, 2 seasons ago. And that was live every night, and it was live to the East Coast and live to the West Coast. So if you made a mistake on the East Coast, it didn't get fixed for the West Coast. Sometimes it even got repeated for the West Coast. And sometimes they repeated the mistake on purpose because they wanted it to feel live. So that's kind of the nature of the beast. As a TD, as a switcher, you're a live editor. I worked in film editing, and I sit for 14 hours a day at a Steenbecker Moviola, and I loved it. I loved that process of having the room to myself. And, sometimes the director would come and interfere with my process. But here, as a technical director, you're kind of there. You're the last in live TV. You are the last point before that picture ends up in somebody's living room. And if you get everything right, they don't know it's live. If you get things wrong, they know it's live.
Lucinda, we were just talking about this before the panel, Tosh.0. What's your challenges setting that up every day? Because it's not a fixed studio. You have to go through and set that up. What's your ESU like on that?
Yeah, it's a very simple show. I mean, it's one camera. It looks simpler than it probably is in reality, but it is truly a posted show, right? Whereas like Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy, for example, or most of my career of live sports and live shows, it is really done live. It actually is sort of a posted show, but we have an audience and you want to have it tight. I mean, you want to make sure that the jokes aren't spoiled and things aren't fed before they're supposed to be fed. You're basically switching a live show to the audience. And the only real trick in that building is the fact that studio doesn't stay put, and that control room is used for something else on Tuesday and on Wednesday, and then when you come in on Thursday, it's now yours. And there's no ESU, right? There's one day of ESU at the very, very start of the season, but there's 12 weeks or 14 weeks of shows on Thursdays that have no ESU, and you walk in about 30 minutes before they want to do something with the talent and with the producers and everybody else, and so they want it perfect. So I get there early, for one, because a half hour isn't enough. If something's wrong, it's never going to be long enough. So I get there early, and I just run through everything and make sure all the parts work. Like you said, that is a big part of it. In an effects-driven show, they have to, and Helga and Dave will be the first to tell you with the Divi switcher, they have to harmoniously work. Because it may work independently, but when you run this behind this behind this, then you find the problem.
Right.
It's like now you're using that resource for something else. It won't go back to this, and it all has to you have to do it enough on your own without anybody in the room or whatever, so you can see those parts to make sure there's no conflict.
Right.
With Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, are those set stages? Is it just those shows on that stage, or they swap them out?
Yeah, we have stage 10 and stage 11 at Sony, and then we share the control room.
And I'm sure they give you more ESU time on those shows. Is that correct? Or
No, we have ESU, same thing, on the first day going into the season for the whole run. And then we overlap because the control room is the same control room. Right. So there's all kinds of patching. The cameras literally get pulled out and taken down the road, and they go back in and get repatched in. So the whole monitor wall and all the cameras and all the tape machines and everything else have to be refaxed. We have to go through and make sure they're all there again. So I just sort of do that in the morning and check everything
Okay.
and trace it all out.
Very good. And thank you. And Robert, working on shows like the Olympics, you're going on remote. I'm not sure for the Olympics opening ceremonies, how much time do you have to set up that show, and what's the process setting that up? Do they tell you, is there a rehearsal?
We generally have about 10 to 12 days
Okay.
setup / rehearsal.
Because the opening ceremonies is a large event. You're talking like a full stadium there.
It's a lot of cameras, a lot of feeds to take into. We also take some world feed cameras, and we'll take our own, mostly our own, but
Okay.
there's definitely some cameras we take in world feed. It's the process is, it's kind of slow, really. It's
Well, you're working in a foreign country at this point.
it may not be a truck. It may be build up, a build up setup. It's, you're in a little shed. You could be literally in a shed. Beijing, we were in a shed. It was like a shed.
Okay, let's make a deal here. Robert, I got 3 cards, 3 questions. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning, Robert also works on Let's Make a Deal. So I'll give you the option. Do you want to pass this to Eric, or do you want to?
Oh, wow, that's a great option.
Can I pass it?
Well, I tell you what, I'll start with Robert and we'll come back down. So Robert works on Let's Make a Deal. We were talking about the creative processes before the panel here. How do you bring your own creative process to a show like Let's Make a Deal, or even the Olympics?
Well, like, let's make a deal. They really don't. They don't really believe in too many graphics folks to build anything. They kind of let me do whatever I want to do, which is a little crazy. But they let me do it. They'll, like door numbers, and if it's Christmas, they want a tree and this and the snow falling and stuff. I just build. So I do a lot of things for them. There's really no CBS gaming or anything like that. It's all, it's all in the switcher. They don't want to pay for that. So we kind of do everything there. It's fun though, because it does keep me busy. They give me we take 3 weeks on, 4 days a week, and then we take a week off. So at the start of those 3 weeks, I get a setup day to come in and basically set up for the next 3 weeks.
Okay. Do you have an idea what the prizes are, what
Yeah,
everything's going on?
yeah, I get everything
Okay.
prior. On that day, they'll give me everything I need for the next 3 weeks.
You know what's behind the door?
So in that instance,
Does everybody yell in the control room to take the door number 3?
The hardest part about that show, which is really might sound strange, but it's door 1, 2, or 3, and everything seems to be wallet 1, door 2, has numbers correlating with cameras.
yeah.
So take camera 1, door 2, everything has this flow, which is awful for what we do.
Yeah.
How often do you get caught on a wrong camera? Is that, not to embarrass or anybody, but taking a wrong camera does happen.
Yeah, the worst part is really opening the wrong door, and that's not me. But the director has given away a car. I almost gave away a trip. That's happened, yeah.
Okay. Lucinda, working on game shows like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, you're following Bob Ennis, a formidable TD that everybody, if you're a TD, you've heard this name before. He put little touches, even though the audience at home might not have seen it, he had little touches into the show. What kind of creativity do you put into your show?
Well, Bob Ennis became the director for Wheel of Fortune, so it's like a class every week, and so it's been a great experience as far as especially DVEs, which are the boxes that make everything move everywhere. And his knowledge of that is so much better than mine. It's like he'll say, "Why don't we make a meteor, like a comet fly across behind the game board and have it twizzle out." So he left the room, and an hour later I built this really cool comet, and he's like, "Man, the comets really don't look like that, but it's really a good." That was great. He was great. Oh, that's okay. And he looked stressed, and I'm like, "So it's not right?" He goes, "Well, it doesn't really look like that." And then he gave me like 4 ideas, and we made it trail better, and it had a better burn to the top and the bottom. So it's a fun, there's a lot of creativity in it. You may get an idea from a producer, or you may get a graphic that has a bouncing beach ball or something, but it's not the right color, it doesn't bounce in the right place, and they want it smaller and to fly in. So a lot of it, right? So we have graphic departments, which is probably easier than Let's Make a Deal. We do have graphic departments that send stuff, but they're not what they want. So we pull parts and pieces apart a lot. And that's fun, actually, and that's what we do. I mean, ESU is like, yeah, everything's there, and then the rest of the morning is spent making those kind of effects, because they are, he wants them live to show to the audience and for the executive producers to see, and they don't want to have to post all those. So every layer you see, from the little split screens to the people's heads that fly up to the graphics that fly over, are all layered live. It's all real. We have 12 DVEs and 12 devices that I run. It's a pretty intense show.
Yeah.
Just to give you a little short story, I trained with Bob Ennis a while ago over at DirecTV. It was a Grants Valley switcher. He showed about 15 minutes, 20 minutes before the show, and just in his spare time, he created this scenic with fields, mountains, trees, a road, a helicopter flying by, and the sun setting after 2 minutes of time. He did this in spare time, and it looked very, very nice. No inputs other than what the switcher provides. Color background, not using any other elements. So, yeah. So, very impressive. Yeah. And this is a gentleman who has the question.
Follow up on that, and I don't envy you following Bob Ennis and that. I worked with Bob for years. How do you guys handle preparing a replacement for you on your shows? Because there are so many moving elements, and I've been called to follow Let's Make a Deal. I didn't do it that time, but you walk in cold as a replacement TD on a switcher that's full of effects, and all you know is you press this button and that happens. But if they want to dissect the effect at all, I have no idea what you have in that board. So how do you help other people come in and follow?
I have a big Dropbox folder, and I tend to, if people are going to cover for my shows, because it's crazy. And you feel responsible for the show, that it looks good, and you feel responsible for the poor gentleman or female that's following you to try to help them. But yeah, we lay it out. I got 6 pages of notes from Bob that said, look, this is what these devices do, this is where I built them, these are the, that kind of thing. You name everything you can, so that when they do, come in, that it says toss effect, or it says end of show, or it says something that makes sense. But yeah, it helps now with computers to be able to upload files and have some sort of tech manuals, that literally say this output goes to that monitor, this does this, and try to give them whatever data you can.
Yeah, and during a setup day, if you're using 2 different stages, one control room, 2 different stages, and they're swapping equipment, you don't know if somebody patched a camera in a wrong spot. So once again, if you haven't worked a show before, you're not quite sure. You may see a source there, but not know if that source is correct or not until you're already taping. So that's why you fax everything out.
Director goes, what the hell is that?
And a lot of shows will do observe dates. I'm going into at midnight over at Hollywood Center, and I'm going Monday because they put another new carbonite switcher in there, and I'm not familiar with the show, so I get to go in for a day and see it before I actually have to do it 2 weeks later. So a lot of shows will pay for an observe day.
Charles, what's your creativity on Dancing with the Stars or Hairspray Live as a different element?
Hairspray Live I can answer fairly quickly. It was such an intense show that there was very little creative input on it.
Okay.
I just hung on to that script and concentrated on everything that was in there, and it was like 10 days of head down and getting my part right. And a lot of times it comes down to that, making sure that your part is right, particularly in live TV. In dance or music focused shows, there are so many shots, the cameras all have their shot numbers, and they're expected to be at a certain point, at a certain place, on a certain beat, with a certain shot. And they expect you to take that shot at that beat. So you rely on them to be there, they rely on you to take the shot when it's supposed to be there. So that part of it, I don't know that you can call too much of a creative process. But on other shows that I've worked on, well, Dancing with the Stars is one of them. During the rehearsal process, a lot of times you'll watch the playbacks as we do things, and the director he knows what he wants to see, and sometimes he sees it, but if you've watched it for the first time, you go, that doesn't look right. But in his mind, He's already seen it. He's seen it like half a dozen times. And so he's sort of fudging the mental process. And you can go, if you go a beat later or a beat earlier, it'll work. And if you have the right director, and fortunately on Dancing we did, he'd go, let's try it on the next pass. And he'll either go, no, I didn't like it, or great, gold star, you get a buck. That sort of thing. So you're part of that process. Also, a lot on sort of these English director-driven shows, they're used to using a vision mixer in Britain, who does most of the cutting on their own. They call very few shots. They direct the process, and they rely on the vision mixer to take the shots. Now, as they graduate into the American process, they're calling a lot more of the shots, but during the interview process portions, particularly on a show like Dancing or America's Got Talent, when there's a lot of back and forth and it's very quick, they'll say, look, by the time I tell you to take it, that moment is gone. Just go. So you end up cutting a lot of that show yourself.
Okay.
But on game shows that I've worked on, the creative process, like these guys have said, they don't have a graphics department. They rely on you. They go, well, maybe we need a graphic of a martini glass. So the deco operator creates a martini glass. Oh, can we have it keyed over there? Oh, do you think it could go back and forth? Okay, so you program that in. Because, the switcher is like poor man's CGI. You've got all these things and toys to play with, which is the best part of the job, if they let you do it. That's when we really have fun, when we build all this stuff. And then you push a button, and the martini glass comes out of nowhere, and it goes, boop, and then it flies away. And everybody goes, everybody laughs and thinks it's great, and that's terrific. Then they ask you to do something else. Well, can you do this, this, and this, and this? Okay, let me build this. I'm going to need about 10 minutes to make this work. So they go, great. And then about 9.5 minutes in, they go, we don't have time for this, let's just move on.
Eric Becker, I had the opportunity to go to the Grammys a few years ago. I couldn't believe the number of stagehands they had moving those sets around. It's a big show, a lot of musical acts. What's your creativity on doing a show like the Grammys? Or even the Tonys is another major musical show.
We really don't get a whole lot of opportunity to be too creative. It's
Really?
mostly execution.
Okay.
We're there to get to the camera at the right time. So you can fudge a little bit ahead of a beat. Typically, when we cut music, and Charles and I have talked about this, we try to be a little bit ahead of the beat as opposed to behind the beat. So a lot of times, creatively, we're trying to push a little bit ahead. I don't know if you edit music if you feel the same way, but I think as a TV, we try to push a little bit ahead. Behind the beat, it just feels slow. So we're just kind of pushing along, come on, and the directors oftentimes are calling that cut. We're trying to.
By the time we've already taken it.
Yeah. I know we're trying to get on the front side. Now there's the British style, which is it's all scripted. Everything is on that beat you cut. So again, we try to get on the front side of that beat. And if there's any kind of action turn, we make a note, wait for them to maybe spin a little bit, and then we cut. Based on the
When it feels good.
Right, exactly. So there's some nuance. It's all about nuances. It's about the frames that we're kind of editing. It's not the second thing. We try to get a little bit ahead, maybe a little bit behind. Creatively, a lot of times we have screens that we'll feed in the house, some monitors, or some big screens that we feed. So a lot of times we're left to our own devices, as to what's going on that screen that's dead center upstage, and so we control the screen. So oftentimes it's not just the feed that goes out over the air. We feed other monitors. Oftentimes, if we don't have a screens technical director on that show, so if there is creativity, a lot of times it's when we change those screens out in the house. So
It's like cutting two shows at the same time.
it is. It really is sometimes 2 or 3 shows at the same time. We build a series of macros. So
On a show like you've done the halftime show for the Super Bowl a number of years, there's a great video online. You can see it on YouTube, the Super Bowl 50 halftime show. Are you looking at the sources before you take them to make sure the camera has its shot, or you're hoping that these camera guys are on it and they have their shots when they need to?
it depends. The minute you start looking up and out off of your script is the minute you kind of get screwed up. So you pretty much will keep your eyes on your paper. What I do is I use preview. And so so then my thumb is really active, so, and that's the preview bus. So I can put on the monitor up here, on my periphery, I can preview something and see if that camera is doing something like this, you know, if they're not settled. So I use the heck out of preview, and I don't know what you guys use, but for every cut that goes out on the air, I'm almost previewing every shot I can, unless it's too quick. And the only reason why I preview it is to see if it's wiggling. If it's static, I'm pushing that camera's going on the air. So that's about the only thing that I can really look at is that, yeah, if it's scripted, it's going on the air.
Okay, very good. Okay, now, everybody's freelance here, or even if you're working a stable show, you're still supplementing yourself with other shows to go along with. How does your creative, or actually, how does working with different directors change the way you switch a show or address a show when you go into it? Eric, I'm not sure the number of directors you're working with on these events. I know you've mentioned them a few times. I don't think I've worked with them yet myself, but Oscars, Tonys, Grammys, is it the same director or?
No, they're all different. Right now, I've worked with a few different directors. They're all different, and you really have to kind of understand them. And you know, a lot of it is just, you know, having a good time. You know, really, when you sit up there, you're sitting next to a director or in the control room for long periods of time, doing a good job. But it's also getting along with the people next to you and trying to bond with the director and understand what they're trying to do. You know, in sports, you know, you have to kind of understand the game and understand how the director shoots that game. So you have to understand what the director's point of view is and what they want. So you know, it's a lot of the side.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, it is.
Reading their mind.
That's the hard part.
It is, yeah, you kind of do have to read their mind a little bit. Well, you actually do, and you can start to understand give them what they want, and not what they ask for.
Yeah.
Really, it's kind of it.
Sometimes you can tell after you've worked with them a while, you can tell what they want by the inflection of their voice. I mean, it gets that subtle.
Yeah, it's a hand gesture. That's why we sit next to them. It's this whole environment that you can get used to so many different signals.
But you know, you start looking at the hand gestures like Ray one, but then they'll flash their hand.
Yeah.
Can you take?
Yeah. So, and Charles, I know Dancing with the Stars had a director change somewhere in there. The main director, I forgot his name, but moved on to another show. You had a new guy, a different director coming in.
Yeah.
What was the change between?
Well, Alex Rodzinski was the original director of Dancing with the Stars, and he brought the show over from England. And John Pritchett was the first TD on the show, and then he had so many dates on American Idol that he couldn't do both shows, so I came. Alex is because I work with him on a bunch of other shows, and Eric and I work with him as well together on Hairspray and on Grease. He's really meticulous. He's very precise in every shot that he wants. He knows where all his cameras are. He thinks in 3 dimensions. He thinks up and down, side. He knows when a camera's going to be in the background of his other shots. And he works really hard to make sure that doesn't happen and to choreograph all of those pictures. He's got a very good eye for composition. So he's constantly working that, and he's working with music and making sure everything is very, very focused and precise and as intimate as possible. Phil Hayes is the new director. He did the last 2 seasons of American Idol. I worked with him 15 years ago on a show called LA Pool Party. It was a BBC show. We shot it in Malibu, and they shot it British style. It was just like, you cut whatever you want. They're going to chop this show to pieces. Don't worry about it. And so he came into Dancing with the Stars working the same way Alex does, but they are 2 different personalities. Alex is more quiet. He likes to joke around, but then when the work comes down, he gets very, very serious and very, very focused. Phil is this affable guy who likes to joke all the time, even when things get really stressed. I mean, occasionally, you know, he gets a little bit tense, but it's always, you know, just let it flow. So there's a difference in the flow in his rehearsal process. He's much wider in his sort of vision. He narrows it down through the rehearsal process till when we're on air, live, everything is tightened up. But the process itself starts here, where with Alex, the process starts here and stays there for the longest time and then gets to here by the time we get to air. And Phil is, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but it's, it's a sort of a looser, more free-flowing process. Two different personalities, both enjoyable to work with, you know, you don't go to you don't do that kind of job and work with those people unless you're having fun. If it's not fun, go do something else.
Lucinda, Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy had the same director until he passed away. Is that correct?
No, Mark Corwin did Wheel of Fortune forever,
Oh, okay, so
and
different
Kevin
directors.
McCarthy does.
I'm sorry.
Jeopardy.
But I know when Bob Ennis took over Wheel of Fortune, who took over Jeopardy? Was there a new director on that?
Oh.
Kevin McCarthy's been doing it since
Okay.
30 years or
I'm
so.
sorry.
Are you still doing
I should have done
it?
more
Are
research.
you still
Okay.
doing it? Are you still?
But they're very opposite
I'm not
personalities
doing
as well,
Okay.
as they all are, right? And that's the fun part about it. I think Eric said it best. It's really, you kind of you enjoy being with them, and it's about sort of a real neat friendship thing. I mean, because you're sitting this close to that person, and you're watching everything that they're watching, and it's a cool team harmony. And I think as a technical director, at least my personality, I sort of change to what they are.
Okay.
You know, I tend to, if they're more gregarious, I'm a little bit more gregarious. If they're very serious and very buttoned down and very quiet, I'm pretty quiet. But, you know, I tend to become whatever they are just because it blends.
All right. Robert, being on the road, did you know who the director was on the Olympics before you got there, or
Yeah.
did they handpicked you to go, or?
Yeah, the person before me passed away
Okay, sorry.
at 50, which is generally what seems to happen. People on the road that do our jobs actually seems to be 50. I don't know why.
50.
Yeah,
That's
amazing.
good.
I could throw in a different question about the stress on the road. Each of you, do you feel the pressure or feel stress on?
I don't know that you feel it at the time you're doing it. You don't really think you are, and I think it's a lot more than you think it is.
Yeah.
And because I really don't.
Okay.
I mean, it's harder catching the flight than it is going to the job.
Yeah.
I think that's more of it than anything, but it's.
Okay. So like going on the road to the Olympics, you weren't worried about what kind of equipment you were gonna get, or like what your crew was gonna be like.
No, I mean a lot.
Not a big concern in your mind.
They're going to give you what they give you. You can't. A lot of times, it's it's good equipment. It's not. But it's.
Okay.
The director I knew. Before I did Olympics, or I worked on NBC golf events with him.
Okay.
So I knew him, and he chose me to be the next person in. And so that was.
You're working with Len Goodside on Let's Make a Deal, right? Right. And anything about working with Len?
He's fun. He's a fun guy. Really, really enjoyable. And then that makes a big difference when you're doing it. And now we do 3-hour shows a day, not 2. We used to do 2. Now it's become a little more work. But at least when you have somebody next to you that's joking all the time.
You like working with somebody, it doesn't become
Yeah,
work.
it really makes a difference. It could be a lot more stressful
All right.
without.
All right, I think this is the question everybody wants to know. Eric Becker, you did the Oscars this past year.
Had nothing to do with that. It wasn't me.
Best Picture fiasco. What was the control room like at that moment?
We were 3.5 hours into a show. We all just wanted to go home. So let's just go home. Our last award, let's just go home, because everything else had done pretty well.
Yeah.
During the whole thing, we got off the air, and none of us, everybody in the truck had no idea that there was 2 cards out there. There's 2 cards out there. I didn't know that. Nobody really knew that the second card made it out there. We thought that there was only 1 card out there. So we were, even getting off the air, we were still confused as to what had happened. So just confusion. We were just following the action as it was coming down. And the director that we had, Glenn Wise, is really good at that. He can, he's not the rigid kind of guy. It's like, okay, let's see what we got. And I just kind of let it unfold. So it unfolded for us just like it unfolded for everybody at home, which is kind of what we do. We just kind of cover the event. And it wasn't until like the next day that I heard about the whole second card being out there. I talked to Gary Natoli, the stage manager at the time, and how that second card made it out there. There was some stuff that really wasn't exactly right. I think everybody read the same stuff that I know in the media. So it was confusion. We had a great director. We had a great camera crew. We all get to work with great crews. And the cameraman that had the shot of the card, you know, and that, I saw him last week. I said, that's the shot of your career. Just quit right now. You got a better shot. You're going to be known for anything better than that. Who was it? That was Dave Carley.
Wow.
Yeah, camera 10. You know. Ready 10, take 10, boom, it was on the air. And it was, hold it up, keep holding it up, keep holding it up. Keep holding it, and the producer kept holding it up so we could read it really clearly. So
The producer was good.
yeah, I mean, most of the time you get a tight shot like that, the minute you put it on the air, it just
Yeah.
goes away. Yeah, we were like, hold it. Yeah, exactly. It's a great shot.
Was there a feed in the back of the house so they could see the program that they knew they're on air holding that card, or was that?
No,
They don't see
there's
program.
no way that the producer would held up the card with
Okay.
it was on the air.
Wow.
So, it was a great crew and, you know, a little bit of luck.
Charles, tell us about some of the equipment you're working with over at Dancing with the Stars or Hairspray Live. Is it Sony switcher, Grass Valley switcher, Ross?
Well, you want all these people to go to sleep? At Hairspray Live was a Grass Valley Calypso switcher. No, Cayenne. Cayenne. It was a Cayenne switcher.
You just dated yourself.
I know. I just push the button. You know, and then somebody tells me to go home eventually. Yeah, it was a Cayenne, a Grass Valley Cayenne switcher, sort of their next to most modern release. It's got all kinds of great buttons. It's got all kinds of fancy effects on a show like Hairspray Live. You know, I have how many cameras? 20, 30,
Yeah.
something like that. So mostly just cameras. I didn't have to worry about effects. I mean, I fed a tape to or EVS to a black and white monitor for some period stuff, and some little TV effects so that when they turned on a TV set, it had noise in it. And I pushed a button, created some noise, pushed a button. That all came up, and you barely saw it. You know, it was just a little thing. But it's those subtle things that can sell a scene. You know, if the screen stays black, it takes you out of the story for a second. You know, if it has a little thing and it belongs there, it keeps you in the story, and that's really what's important. But really, it's just cutting cameras. Cayenne switcher on Dancing with the Stars, same kind of switcher. There, I use a lot of the effects, all of the fancy bells and whistles. The directors are always going, you know, can you make it black and white? Can you give it a film look? Can you put some scratches in it? Can you make it stutter? Can you give me a flash? Can you give me a thing that zips across, like comet? A comet. Oh, it has to go. Oh, we don't want it to go in front of the mirror ball. We want it to go behind the mirror ball. Can you put a mask around the mirror ball so it looks there? In Disney Week, can you make these animated characters look like they're dancing with the live people? You know, can you size it? No. Can you add a shadow here or there? All of those toys. It's fun, but you've barely done something and they ask you to change it. Or the executive producer, who was not in the room during all the rehearsals in the effects building, comes in and goes, just before the show goes, nah, I don't like, that's too big, and can we make it a little more semi-transparent? Okay. On America's Got Talent, we use a Sony 8000, 7000, whatever the numbers are. The fancier their switcher, the lower the number goes, so whatever the number is. Again, it's one of those things. I've got this big board in front of me. I find out where all the bells and whistles are so I can play with it. Sometimes they use it, sometimes they don't, but mostly it's just cutting cameras or feeding various monitors to sort of create a seamless show. On other shows, it can be a little more difficult, a little easier. There is a switcher called a Ross switcher, which is made by a Canadian company. I actually worked on the first Ross switcher back in 1976 or 1977.
Dave Ross, you can actually contact him directly. His number is in the book that you can Call his secretary, hey, can I talk to Dave? And he will take your phone call.
It's true. I guess he would, because that switcher is very complicated to work with. Even from day one back in 1977, all the way through to the present day. It's got a lot of bells and whistles, you just have to find it. And of course, every director who gets one of those wants you to play with all of those to see what you can do.
Lucinda, on Tosh.0, you said it wasn't a fixed studio. Is it an air pack you're working with?
No, it's at the Tennis Channel. It's in one of their control rooms. It's just used by other people.
Okay.
And Robert, is Let's Make a Deal locked into a stage, and
Yeah, it's a
Not
fly
used for anything
pack.
else?
Yeah.
the fly pack for that? What kind of switch are you using with that?
Cayenne.
Cayenne, okay. All right. What have been the key technical advancements for your job? I'm assuming the switcher is a main portion of it, but there's other advancements like the EVS. In the new digital age, the amount of equipment's coming around. What has been the most helpful in your positions, Eric, or anybody?
I keep going first.
Digital, going from analog to
Oh yeah,
digital.
that was fun.
The single biggest innovation in our job. Setting up a show would take an hour, hour and a half, and you'd probably have to recalibrate everything halfway through the day. Digital, you walk in, you put in a file, boom, everything's there, if you set it up properly, which is why you can go from you can take a 1 hour or 2 hour setup day at the beginning of the season, and then production will cut you down to a half hour or 15 minutes later on in the season, because it's all there. And,
You worked last week as you worked this week. So,
that's pretty much it.
Okay, and we've all started in the analog world where it's like you really had to hone in the equipment to get it working with the switcher. Everything had to be synced. So if you cut from one videotape to another videotape, you wouldn't get hash in between or non-sync line, a non-sync signal. With today's world of everybody being digital, with the new technology, how has the position of technical director changed, and where do you see it going? New kids coming in today don't know the analog world or what happens if something's not working. Where are they going to get their experience of, tracking down an issue? Or is it? So that's, I guess, a relatively weird question.
I do a lot of training for Sony and setting up at stations and stadiums and places. And I'd say that the big challenge now sort of is the fact that you've got to be pretty computer savvy. You have to be sort of comfortable with going through menus and seeing what things are, because from one company to another, they all do the same thing. They all have to put out multiple paths. They all have to do keys. They all have to do make things black and white, whatever. They all kind of will accomplish the same thing to an average degree. But where those menus are is as different as between a Macintosh and a PC. And so you have to, I don't know, I read manuals, I watch YouTube videos. I'm constantly dealing with, Sony, which I know better, with the engineers. But it's, you gotta have the guts to tear it apart and break it. What happens if I do? Ooh. And the best thing about digital is I can store it before I start, and I can get it back to that state. So if I totally mess it up and the VTRs don't run anymore and the things don't work anymore, I'll just load my file back. So the first thing I do is to save a file when I start, and then I tweak it and hopefully kind of track where you're at.
Although we tried that on KCET with their new switcher. Did you film for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the new location?
And it was a raw switch.
It's just terrible.
And the guy who normally did the show was in there with me, and we set up all the files for the show and saved them. Well, when Lucinda came in the next day, none of those files were there.
We rebuilt it. Wow. It sometimes works. Best laid plans.
Yeah, you gotta be willing to push those buttons.
Absolutely.
Take chances, because like on the new Sony's panel,
Oh.
you can I did this in the middle of a rehearsal a couple weeks ago for this Kids' Choice, and you can change what the mapping says on your switcher, and it's like the source mapping. So I was like, oh, what's this button doing? We're in rehearsal. I push this button, and all of a sudden the whole panel lights up with all these aux sends, and I have no idea where my camera went through 14 of us on this panel. And I know this director is going to be saying, ready 12, take 12 real soon. And I was like, what do I do? And so I found the source button that I pushed, and I had the wrong bus because you got the 1, 2, 3, 4, and I had like the top bus assigned to my label.
Yeah.
So you got to be willing to push buttons and then kind of suffer sometimes. So I found the right one before he called 12. And
The very first Sony digital switcher they brought in here, they put on the KTLA lot, and I was the poor guy working on it. And all the menus were, they wanted to build a switcher that was like a Grass Valley switcher, but they didn't want it to look like a Grass Valley switcher. So you really had to find where all these menus were. And the director comes in on a game show and says, okay, can you make a box swipe? Sure. Go have a coffee. That's,
They all do it, but where?
yeah, exactly. You got to say, oh, sure, I can do that, sure. And then you distract. Over there.
How about them Dodgers?
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes
Kind of it.
sometimes you find things just by playing around. In the old analog days, there was a Grass Valley 1600 or 1620 switcher. I know the meaning of this too, those of you who aren't switchers. But just in playing around, I found that it could do certain things. You know, like what happens if you split the fader bar here and that sort of thing. And then it worked out for me. A director was doing another show, and the TD he had knew how to use the switcher, but had not played around with the various functions. And he asked the engineers to ask me, I was working on another stage, if I knew how to make a square box rotate. And I said, yes, just put it in white, build the box, split the fader bar, it'll spin. He fired his switcher, which I was kind of bad, felt bad about, and hired me. just for a day. And hired me. But you find those things just by playing around. Rick did things with the old Grass Valley 300 that none of us knew it could do by getting into the guts and pulling a pin and turning it sideways and making it talk to various other things.
All right. What advice would you give somebody starting out in the business today? I mean, besides playing with the equipment, getting into this business, what would you say?
Anyone?
I think Robert, running the tape, recording the director, being able to execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That-
that was, it's, you really get a workflow, that way, without having to have somebody breathe down your neck. Just recording a director's track and sit there and play it back and listen to it and try and work through what you can and really, you'll really get a lot further that way, by the end of the day. And
Especially with rhythm and timing. And that,
Rhythm and timing's everything.
It has the pressure of all that without.
Right, without
Yeah.
without raising you to that level of,
Yeah.
oh no, what if I don't, yeah.
That's
And it
important.
gets you there.
Recording the PL if you
Sure.
can.
Yeah, if a director will let you, always have to ask. Don't just record the director.
But you're gonna get stuff that the director.
Walter Miller alien on Kiss Radio or whatever it was 20 years ago.
Well, and there also are switchers in strange places, like I put one into the Mosaic Church down the street, right? And they may be at your kid's school, or, I mean, sometimes you don't have the accessibility where you work. I mean, unless you actually, if you work at a TV station, there's one sitting there, but often you can't get to it. But you'd be surprised what you can learn off the line, off of videos and manuals, and that there are also sort of a lot of places. There's a lot of little ones out there. The Black Magics are pretty cool. And they're in a lot of schools, and they're in a lot of, smaller places that have, a lot of churches have switchers, a lot of, strange nightclubs.
Convention centers.
Yeah, they're in a lot of different places than just, television installations.
And in those places, you get a chance to play around and find out what it does. Push a bunch of buttons that you wouldn't get a chance to do in a production setting. Typically, production is set up for one thing, so you'll do all of the things that you need for that production. And if you're starting out, you don't get a chance to play beyond the confines of that. If you work at a local station, particularly in local news where they try all sorts of stuff, you'll probably put a switcher through its paces more than anything that we do on a regular basis. And they'll start out with a simple show, and then they'll add this, and then they'll add that, and then they'll add that, and then before you know it, you've got 300 effects that the guy who built it knows where everything is, because he built it as he went along. And then you come in and you go, oh. And you've been doing this for 20 years, and you can't figure out how
Charles
to
has
get
done
it.
this to me frequently. I go in to do Charles's show, I'm like,
Oh.
Charles, what did you do?
That's because I always find the hard way first, and then I try and figure it out, which is why I love picking up his show, because he makes everything simple.
On purpose.
All right, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but let's go to the audience questions.
I kind of have a question along the lines of what we're just talking about. I'm an assist in reality, so I had no idea of kind of this other world. But from what you guys are just saying right now, it sounds like there's not a definitive path of you guys have an assist that then bumps up and learns and stuff like that. You just kind of go out, learn switchers, or try to get on. I mean, is news stations, is that the best like path of learning?
News? I'm
But the
sorry.
problem with news stations is they've gone automated, right? So I don't know how many, because I'm not familiar with the LA market exactly, how many of them are automated. I'd say 3 out of 4 probably. So it's a different system now because they've downsized and they've done automation, and it's a button push and it's coding.
KTLA went that way, and you can see it on the air.
Yeah, it's a little
You just
different.
go, whoa.
And that's why some places, stadiums are fantastic. Dodger Stadium has a switcher. They all do. Each Staples Arena and Anaheim and all those places have equipment. And if you can get in the door there, it's hot. They'll train you, usually, and they pay less because it's not broadcast level. But you're feeding the screens and you're doing complex effects and you're learning how to build things. So sometimes the PAs and churches, are using volunteers, and then there's finally a paid position. There's a lot of interesting layers to get in. TV stations aren't bad, but automation is something that probably has changed it for the technical director position.
Really, mostly you have to have a desire, you have to really want to do it. And just the desire to do it will probably guide you to where you have to go to make that happen. You have to want to have a desire to fly things around the screen. Make pretty colors, make pretty pictures, sort of play games with your TV set. And then you look for places, churches, convention centers,
I've trained a lot
stadiums.
of people too. I mean, if you contact people.
Video
I
game
bring people on
convention.
jobs sometimes, and I'll
A
show them
just
what
a
I have,
passion
and
for it.
I think contacting people. In certain jobs, you can't take people on all your jobs, but there's certain shows and certain directors that won't mind, and producers, and come along. First, see if you like it. First, see if you even if it's something you want to do. Put the headset on, listen to the call of the show. Listen, that's an easy thing to start out that way and see how you like it.
And once you know that you like it and you've gotten some experience, but you're not in the union, then what is the pathway to getting into the union for
There's a lot of technical directors are not in a union, and I think getting a union job is not that easy. I mean, just for the fact that there's a number of people already in those positions in a list, like sports. The easiest way to get into it is sports. There's a lot of non-union jobs that you can do, like high school sport, football or college. And then when you're called up for Anaheim, I know Dave, I worked with Dave over at Fox Sports. He was doing Anaheim. Say again? David Bernstein, sitting in the back of the house here. Whereas that's an easier way. A lot of the sports trucks, as far as I remember, are still, there's a lot of IATSE events. So.
Is it a case of once you get a union job offered to you, then you can join the union?
In my experience, the TV world goes in cycles, although reality seems to have captured and hung on to the longest cycle so far. But there was a time when game shows sort of ruled the airwaves, and it could come back again. A lot of game shows are non-union. End up working on non-union game shows, non-union sports like regional sports networks and things like that, they're non-union. And if you have those jobs, and I'm only speaking from my own experience, after 100 hours or 100 days, of any kind of technical directing work, you apply to the union. You pay whatever the initiation fee is now,
So it's similar to editing.
and then you're a union member. Now you can take union or non-union jobs. So
Okay, thank you.
There's some .com companies out there too
Internet
that,
blogs.
you know, that are starting to come on the scene, so you can get some switching experience.
well, that's true. There's that whole internet
Out there,
Yeah.
and, you know,
Yeah.
that's sugar, and
Yeah.
so it's about getting out there and pushing those buttons, you know, and seeing if you like it, you know, because there's more to it than just pushing the buttons. You've got a crew that's out there that you have to, you know, cameramen, utilities, so you have to have a broader understanding of television production. So a way into it, like I came in maybe through audio, mixing audio, so the more you understand about the process of television production, the better TV you'll be.
Teamwork.
Right, you gotta know other people's jobs.
I support that answers. I often get people asking, where can I go to school to learn how to be a teacher? And I'm like, well, you can go to, you know, a training session at Grass office. When the Cayenne came out, I paid them $3,000 to go to Cayenne training, and then everybody else said, how do I do this? I said, all right, that's fine. Sony, you can go to Sony school, you can go to Grass school, we'll have a Divi school soon, I'm sure. And, but the point is, you can learn how to work the equipment, but that's not the job.
No.
That's just the tool. The job, you have to go, you have to observe, experience people do it, or take the time to listen to the PL, record the PL, or find a way to, you know, experience it from close up, and then understand all those little processes that are happening that you are part of. And then you can go to school to learn the tool, and now you'll have a better understanding of what you need to learn about the tool in order to use it in the job. It's a hard place because the tool is so much harder to learn to use now than the 300 or the 1680.
Hey man, those are hard to
Or the
learn.
1X.
what do you say?
Well, no, they didn't have menus. It was, you had 20 buttons and a fader bar, and that was it. Now you got like menus, and you know, it can be overwhelming if you're also trying to figure out when do I call the cameras back from their break, and you know, how do I make sure that I don't, you know, that I'm protecting my director, and why does all that other work flow? So
You're absolutely right. It's a big part of the job is the teamwork. We've all gotten Emmy nominations and Emmys, but the category to keep in mind is technical directors, cameras, and video control. It's the entire team that gets the Emmy. And sometimes you get the Emmy because the camera work was so fantastic. Sometimes you get the Emmy because the technical directing work was so fantastic. But that rarely happens because nobody knows what we do.
I know when you don't do it well.
A question for directing or technical directing, when you're outside and you're dealing with weather. For example, I was on the Warner Brothers lot when we were getting ready for the Grease Live, and I know some of the shots were outside, and it was pouring rain. So the question is, when you're doing rehearsal, how do you figure out contingencies for something like that? When, I mean, I know probably it's more the directing, but as a technical director, like, you know, you guys obviously have to figure out when to start going in the contingency plan, I guess.
Well, you have to think about, you have to have a backup plan.
Right.
At any live event, and the minute you don't have a backup plan is the minute that you needed to have a backup plan. So you always have to plan where you're going to go, what's going to happen, what if, and you always have to have that in the back of your mind. It wasn't really the rain that really was hurting us on that Grease; it was the wind, because we were getting shut down because the wind was blowing so hard that the tent structure was going to get knocked over. So, and we had a plan. We actually, you know, had recorded. The plan for that was we recorded a dress rehearsal, and we were going to run the tape of the dress rehearsal up until the first cut when we were inside. So we actually rehearsed that during that moment. So we had a plan.
And that was the same director for Hairspray as it was for Grease, same plan. And you know, from where I was sitting, it never entered my mind to worry about going to plan B. I was in a position where I went, he knows what he's doing. We're all prepared. If we have to go, we go. Although just before we went to air, and a half hour before we went to air, and Eric was in the other truck, and they were doing all the getting ready for all the internet live stuff. the AD, Carrie, and myself, and Alex, the director, came into their booth and said, our control room just went down. I've lost the switcher. We're going to bring our scripts over, and you guys are going to cut the show.
I believed it for a moment. And my reaction was, oh shit. Seriously, and then you gave it away. You kind of, I forget what you said. You got into too much detail. I said, okay. They got me for a second. Thanks for that.
I'm a live sports TV, and I'm finding that we're now having to merge the directing role and the TV role. Production companies, these sports franchises, they want to be able to send someone out that can direct, so there's one less body, one less thought in the process.
For the TV rate.
Exactly. Right. So, do you find that also that's changing on the entertainment side? That you're starting to merge those two positions, either for convenience, for ease of the production, whatever? Do you find that changing? Really?
Not very often. I mean, it happens on the occasional production, but usually during the rehearsal process where the director leaves the room and goes, "Sir, just cut this.
Yeah.
I need to go take a break."
Not as a.
But as a matter of course, in entertainment, no.
Not yet.
Say it's on the East Coast. I know that was big at some of the local small stations that a director would also be switching his own show. I just talked to Steve. I was just talking to him on the phone last night, who was doing a red carpet for Steve Myers. Thank you. Sorry, and he was cutting and switching his own show, but that was just for the internet. As far as I know, it wasn't being fed out live. So, smaller productions like that.
But I'm
so.
finding major
sports
franchises doing
that. Okay.
You've got 15 cameras, but you're still directing.
Wow. Because there's a lot going on.
So is that a step up or a step down from the process where you were also the deco operator and the station?
What's to say you're not still continuing to do that?
A question about the switchers and the trucks. For a long time, I've worked with the trucks a lot. And for a long time, I was always harassing sports trucks from Sony in an entertainment truck, like 95% of the time, or a D35 in an entertainment truck. I'm seeing kind of that change. Is there more grass coming in? I'm sorry, Cindy. But it seems like
Oh yeah,
to
grass
me
is the best.
Are the entertainment trucks getting more? Because I don't see Sony's coming into sports trucks, but
All Mobile's still doing Sony, and I think NEV's going Grass Valley. I think
It's got more to do with the best deal they can swing for the company.
That explains what he just said.
Right.
Grass had always been in the business for, or started selling dozens of trucks. It was easier to transition to grass and continue that route.
Being at Sony Studios with Unfortunate Jeopardy, you got a Sony switcher, right?
It's ancient though.
Why can't you get a new one?
I don't know. Because it works, right?
For the same reason
And
that they use the Quantel 5000 whatever.
It works.
because you're making
You're making a fortune with a cheap piece of equipment.
Any other questions?
I guess that kind of leads into a thought or question I have. So as switchers, you guys don't have real equipment because my father had a switcher. And I remember being on sets with him and him switching, our live rock and roll shows and stuff.
With his own switcher.
With his own switcher.
I could see that for something like that, but for what we do, they rent everything as one whole. It wouldn't really work for our position. I'm gonna bring my switcher.
Right.
It would be.
But I just thought, even for like learning purposes or at home, like you could build your craft at home with switchers, learning stuff. It was just a thought.
The more they get computerized, the more you probably could start building things at home on your laptop and going to the switcher and putting your flash drive in, and building it on a computer nowadays.
Yeah,
we're
Dave's
not that far away from that.
Well, yeah, Steve Laxton, who you mentioned, he had one of every kind of switcher in his house.
In his house.
And Elvis got a 35 still in his house.
You do?
Extend, actually extend. But I have a kayak and a DV2 and 2 Indigos and whatnot.
Wow. Nice.
All right, any other questions?
You guys all kind of started in sports, so when you went to the entertainment, what was the really big change that you noticed?
The paycheck.
True. True statement.
There's something about that.
The politics and the job, like I think Bernstein said very well, a lot of what we do is sort of crew chief and control, the schedule, and does people get breaks and that kind of thing. And it's a little bit different in entertainment. And so who you talk to and who does, like, who actually moves the cameras. Like in sports, it's the camera guys. And in entertainment, it's the utilities. There are different roles and there's different jobs, and there's a lot of politics that's different between the two.
And I think in sports, entertainment, I think, is much more precise. Precision is key. If you're a half a beat late, you missed it. And in sports, it's not necessarily that precise, but they both have their difficulties. And in sports, you cover an event. In entertainment, we're pretty much creating the event, and that's a big difference.
I found TDing sports
They're both difficult.
was the most difficult switching by far that I've ever had to do. The sheer number of effects, and in the time when I was doing it, we were building all this stuff. We were building all the effects, sometimes on the fly while the game was going on. I'd reach the end of a football game, I wouldn't have a clue as to who won. It was still building, and it was really difficult flying all these things around. With the coming of the digital age, it became easier to start storing stuff that you could use from game to game. But in the analog days, you sort of carried everything around on a floppy disk and hoped that it matched whatever equipment you were dealing with. And you were paid like half of what you could make on what I call the shiny floor shows. and the shiny floor shows were a lot easier.
Nickelodeon slime shows.
Back to the sports questions. I watch a lot of football. When you guys do, is there a rehearsal like with the commentators as to the tangents of where they're going? Because there are times I'm watching them talk, and then like the graphics on the screen, like they'll bring up stats, they'll bring up things, or rolling tape. It's like, how deep is the well that you guys can go, or the show can go in any direction depending on how the event, I guess, is unfolding?
Robert?
Well, I mean, you have to be ready for anything. That's part of setting your switcher up properly. You have to think that through yourself, where we could go, what we could do, and what, I mean, and sports definitely goes in crazier ways than maybe some entertainment shows. But you still have to be ready for it. You still have to have backup machines, backup tape machines, backup, everything. Everything's backed up, and you have to be ready to go to it. And you have to have it all. And usually that doesn't happen, but it might happen, and you have to be ready. You have to be ready.
Yeah, typically in a football game, though, the announcers will not drive the direction in which they go. A lot of times, the producer's talking in their ear, and he's the one who's driving where it goes, and he's relying on his EBS operator who says, "I've got 99 on the replay." He jumps in and says 99's ready to go, talk about the last play or whatever it is, or talk about his wife who's in the stands because we've got a shot on her on camera too. And then they'll just go, and it's kind of that seamless process. But a lot of the background people will say, "I've got the still store," or "I've got the replay," or "I've got this," or "I've got that moment," or "Take a look at that."
Right.
And that sort of filters through the producer, who yells at the top of his lungs to the director, who yells at the top of his lungs to the TV.
They don't yell so much anymore. I think directors have gotten a little bit quieter.
It's definitely
the producers are yelling just
The
as
producers
loud.
are yelling.
That HR thing has changed.
Yeah, HR changed things. Robert was saying about being able to go anywhere. I think that's kind of what we do, is you have to set yourself up. If you got a man on first and third, and there's a base hit, what's the director gonna do? You have to think about that. Or if it's a third, second out, third out, you're gonna go to commercial break. You have to think about, and it's like in music, if you're in the middle of a verse, and the song's going on, you go to a chorus, you're gonna go to some high, wide shot to the top of the chorus. So you kind of set yourself up, you kind of have an idea where you could go. Right. And there could be 6 options, two options, but you have to, anticipate where the director is gonna take you. And the more you can anticipate, the better off you're gonna be in this job.
And a lot of times the most difficult thing is, how do you get into an act and how do you get out of an act? Yeah. Everything in between, you're following the ball, or the script or whatever it is. But those are the changeable things. If they don't get it right coming in, then you're playing catch up. If they screw it up going out, you have to be ready to go anywhere.
Well, like in football, we used to always, like at the beginning of the game, you do lineups. So lineups is always a very complex, layered thing. And they'd get the ball and they'd run across the entire field and they'd score a touchdown, and we're not going to lineups. We're going to touchdown, right? And so everything that was set is got to be shifted, and that's where I think that's where the stress is, if there is any, is it, totally ramping a different direction. But it's also where the fun is.
Yeah, but that's why we walk out of the truck like this.
All right, any other questions? All right, I want to thank the panel. Just to give you a heads up on what's coming up with the Editors Guild, there's a Rush Street Mixer in Culver City on Wednesday next on 3/29. Also in April, Lillian Benson is being honored with the Fellowship and Service Award from the Motion Picture Editors Guild. It's a wonderful event. If you can attend, I'd look into getting tickets for that. Don't forget to go to the website for to be updated on issues with the Editors Guild and other events going on. That's editorsguild.com. And don't forget, at the end of the panel, we've got Dave Bernstein back here with the Divi, the new EVS switcher. I want to thank the panel. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everybody had fun.